خير الخلق قدوتنا تعال وزر وشاركنا وقم بالخير سابقنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا لقانا في ابن تيمية وخير الخلق قدوتنا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله المحمود على كل حال، ونعوذ بالله من حال أهل الضلال، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الكبير المتعال، وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا محمدًا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم المآل. أما بعد. We're still teaching فروع الفقه. We're on the section or the statement in the book pertaining to طهارة, and the author said وأما الطهارة فهي صغرى وهي الوضوء يحتوي على سنة وهو التسمية. The purification is the minor ritual wudu purification. He mentioned purification is minor, which means there's a major purification. Minor is what requires wudu, and it's referred to as minor because it pertains to some body parts. Major requires ghusl, and it's referred to as major because it pertains to washing the entire body. The author is talking about sunan al-wudu. وهي الوضوء يحتوي على سنة وهو التسمية. He said wudu consists of recommended sunnah acts. The first one that we're going to go over is mentioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name prior to wudu. The author here divided matters pertaining to wudu into sunnah and wajib. He began with the sunnah. Sunnah, according to the fuqaha, is what one is rewarded for doing, yet at the same time he's not sinned if he leaves it out. He divided matters pertaining to wudu into sunan and wajibat, obligations and recommended acts. Now, unlike the author here, most of the latter ulama of the Hanabila, they divided wudu into three categories: sunan and furud and wajibat. The author only said there's two categories: sunan and wajibat. The reason the author's division is different is because he considered tasmiyah, bismillah, before wudu, a sunnah. So one of the sections wasn't needed, whether it may be wajib or fard. The latter fuqaha of the Hanabila divided matters into sunan, wajibat, and furud. Why? Because they don't consider basmala sunnah. They consider it an ordain, a wajib. They believe it's obligatory to say bismillah prior to wudu. But they don't consider it at the level of a fard. So you got fard here, you got sunnah here. They don't consider basmala at the level of a fard, so they placed it under the category of wajib, which is an act that is compulsory, but slightly less than a fard. The latter fuqaha of the Hanabila categorized basmala prior to wudu as a wajib instead of a fard, and with that they would have sunan, wajibat, and furud. Our mas'ala here, our first mas'ala, is saying bismillah prior to wudu wajib or sunnah. The first opinion is that it's wajib. You must say bismillah before wudu. And that's the opinion of al-Zahiri and al-Hasan al-Basri and Ishaq ibn Rahawayh. And it's one of two opinions of Imam Ahmad, and it's the official opinion of the madhab of the Hanabila. It's al-Mu'tamad fil madhab. Al-Mu'tamad fil madhab mean the official opinion of the madhab. That saying bismillah prior to wudu is a wajib, it's a must. The latter ulama of the Hanabila consider tasmiyah prior to wudu wajib. And this is the opinion chosen by Abu Bakr al-Khallal for the madhab. And since we're studying the book al-Madhab Imam Ahmad, at times we pass by essential figures that are not really popular who serve the madhab. And it's important to know them, just like we mentioned, Muwaffaq al-Din ibn Qudama, rahimahullah ta'ala. Here, Abu Bakr al-Khallal, he's really the man behind structuring the entire madhab of Imam Ahmad, rahimahumullah ta'ala jami'ah. He was a child when Imam Ahmad died, because Imam Ahmad died around 241 after the Hijrah. Abu Bakr al-Khallal was born 235 years after the Hijrah. So when Imam Ahmad died, Abu Bakr al-Khallal was a young child, 6 or 7 years old. He grew up and he turned into talab al-ilm, and more specifically, he dwelled into studying the works of Imam Ahmad. And he traveled to Persia, in Syria, in Al-Jazira al-Arabiya, and nearly every person and everywhere he could have, where he heard that they may have any type of knowledge pertaining to Imam Ahmad, whether it may be a fatwa or a letter or anything else. Al-Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah ta'ala, said there was no independent madhab of Imam Ahmad prior to Abu Bakr al-Khallal's compilation of the work of Imam Ahmad. And he compiled a reference called Al-Jami' li'ulum al-Imam Ahmad. Al-Jami' became the encyclopedia and reference of the madhab of the Hanabila with no competition to it. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said it's 20 volumes long. Ibn Kathir said there was no book on the madhab of the Hanabila like Al-Jami' li'ulum al-Imam Ahmad. But that book does not exist today. Most likely, it was among the literature and books that were destroyed by the Tatar when they invaded Baghdad, because that's where the author is from. Some ulama, like Al-Khiraqi, had summarized. Al-Khiraqi summarized that reference book, and that summary is available today. Abu Bakr al-Khallal and his book, his encyclopedia, his reference book, Al-Jami' li'ulum al-Imam Ahmad, they go to show what I've mentioned before in the past many times, that a student or students are usually the ones who revive and make the works of their shuyukh successful. So back to our issue here. Same basmala. Basmala before wudu. The first opinion we said, it's wajib. It's an obligation. And that's one of two opinions by Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala in the official opinion of the madhab. Their proof is وَلَا وُضُوءَ لِمَنْ لَمْ يَذْكُرِ اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. The wudu of a person who does not mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the beginning is not a valid wudu. And this supposed hadith has been narrated by 9 of the Sahaba. Sa'id ibn Zayd and Sahel and Aisha and Ali and Anas radiyallahu ta'ala anhum jami'an. Some like Al-Mundari and Al-Shawkani and Ibn Hajar and Ibn Salah authenticated that hadith, and their opinion is that there is numerous narrations. Yes, they're all weak, but they strengthen each other, and that makes it authentic, which is really not the correct opinion. The hadith is very weak. The second opinion on basmala is that tasmiyah. Tasmiyah means saying Bismillah. Tasmiyah prior to wudu is sunnah. First opinion was wajib. It's sunnah. That's the opinion of the Hanafiya and Malikiyya and Shafi'iyya, and the second opinion of the Hanabila. And the author of this book chose that as his opinion because he said in the statement we're studying, وَهِيَ الْوُضُوء يَحْتَوِي عَلَى sunnah وَهُوَ التَّسْمِيَةِ. What's their proof? Their proof is the ayah in the Quran that describes wudu. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. The verse described in wudu in the Quran did not mention tasmiyah. So it's not a fard nor a wajib. Their second rationale is that there was many Sahaba who narrated the details of the wudu of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and they did not mention the tasmiyah, like the hadith by Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As and Abdullah ibn Zayd and others. If it was wajib, they said, they would have narrated from the description of the wudu of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that he said Bismillah in it, and none of them did. The third rationale is Most agree that the hadith is not authentic. Assume it's authentic. Assume the hadith that the wudu of a person who does not mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the beginning is not valid. Assume that's authentic. They said even if it's authentic, it doesn't mean that it's wajib. It merely means that the wudu is not complete wudu. It's not complete in its reward. Not that it voids or nullifies the wudu totally, because there's other ahadith that narrate the description of the wudu of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without mentioning the tasmiyah. And they said this hadith is like the hadith لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. You will not believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. Does that mean that you're a kafir? Does that mean somebody who doesn't love for his brother what he loves for himself is a kafir? That's not considering that person a kafir. It merely denies complete full iman to one who doesn't love for his brother what he loves for himself. In Al-Majmu' and Al-Mughni, they said it means the wudu is diminished in reward, not void. That's if that hadith was even authentic. Rajah, the selected opinion, it's clear that tasmiyah would be a sunnah, not a wajib. And the proof for it being a sunnah is actually general proof, not specific proof pertaining to wudu, because the hadith is weak, very weak. It's actually proof outside of wudu, outside the context of wudu, that makes tasmiyah prior to wudu a mustahab. Like what we mentioned, if you remember, in tayammum. The hadith in Sahih Bukhari. لو أن أحدكم إذا أتى أهله قال بسم الله اللهم جنبنا الشيطان وجنب الشيطان ما رزقتنا. If any of you, prior to having sexual relationship with your wife, say before starting, in the name of Allah, اللهم جنبنا الشيطان وجنب الشيطان ما رزقتنا. If basmala is recommended prior to something like sexual relationship with a wife, then it should be recommended in other matters like wudu as well. In fact, Al-Bukhari placed that hadith under the chapter باب التسمية على كل حال وعند الوقاع. التسمية على كل حال وعند الوقاع. He named the chapter saying Bismillah or mentioning Allah's name during every action and prior to having sexual relationship with one's wife. So tasmiyah is sunnah in plenty of matters, both in ibadat and non-ibadat, like eating and drinking and entering the house and leaving the house and sexual relationship as we mentioned and other matters. So they said prior to wudu it should be included as well as a sunnah. And an important note here, let me mention, is that the hadith, the wudu of a person that doesn't mention the name of Allah is not valid. It's in Abu Dawood and Ibn Majah and Al-Bayhaqi and Tabarani, Al-Hakim and Ahmad and Al-Daraqutni and other books of hadith. The hadith is considered weak by Imam Ahmad, Al-Bayhaqi, Al-Nawawi, Al-Bazzar and many other ulama of hadith. In fact, Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar said that Imam Ahmad had said, which he mentioned in Bulugh al-Maram, لا يثبت فيه شيء, لا يصح في هذا الباب شيء. Ibn Qudama in al-Mughni said that Imam Ahmad had said about this hadith, ليس يثبت في هذا حديث ولا أعلم فيها حديثا له إسناد. The statements by Imam Ahmad all indicate that Imam Ahmad strongly saying, in meaning that there's nothing authentic in specific pertaining to saying Bismillah prior to wudu. There's no authentic hadith pertaining to that matter, specifically. And the conclusion is that the hadith is extremely weak. Every chain of its numerous chains are weak. But this hadith was used by the Hanabila for this matter. So does that discredit them? And here I want to make two comments. I want to make two comments for Tullab al-Ilm. Some like to toss around the term that there's nothing authentic in this matter. Make a nice little banner, post it, and just let it go. And it could be factual. And a lot of times it is factual. But with no explanation, no elaborations, and at times when they're asked, it's left with no comment. That causes concern because you need to speak to people on a level they understand. due to their lack of upbringing and ilm and wisdom in it, and the ignorant followers they have, they cause slander to ulama who are above the level of the shuyukh of their shuyukh. How? When you see, or when they see, and this has actually happened, there's nothing authentic under basmala. For example, it wasn't basmala, it was a total another issue. No elaboration, no explanation. When asked, there's no concern in answering. And it's concerning to an ignorant audience that has no foundational study. They'll see someone else mentioning tasmiyah before wudu and considering it sunnah. And they'll accuse that person. They'll infer that that person accepts or promotes weak ahadith. That person, they'll say, is not a muhaddith. Or they'll bolster and say, no, they don't know about the rules of the mutaqaddimin. That low-key slander may even reach all the way impliedly or maybe directly to the likes of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala. And that audience ends up accusing others of promoting weak ahadith, which is a dangerous accusation. They fail to explain to their audience, for example, that there's other ways. Ulama may have concluded that this matter is a sunnah or a wajib, like the matter of basmala as a prime example before wudu. They inferred that it could be a sunnah prior to wudu, just like it is in qiyas to saying it prior to sexual relationship or prior to eating and drinking or entering the house. That may not be needed for talabat al-ilm who know this. But their ignorant, slandering audience, yes, they need to know this kind of stuff. So yes, it can be there's nothing authentic under this matter. But there's other ways ulama may arrive at concluding that basmala is a sunnah in wudu, for example. Another issue pertaining to this. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah clearly stated with the most clearest of clear terms that this hadith on saying Bismillah before wudu is weak. Strong terms on it. Yet his entire madhab are split between considering it a wajib or a mustahab. Many even using this hadith itself. How does Imam Ahmad or the madhab use a hadith that they say is weak? Is that a deficiency in Imam Ahl Sunnah, Imam al-Hadith, who memorized over 1 million hadith? And when we say he memorized 1 million hadith, we mean he memorized 1 million hadith. Some people say there isn't even 1 million hadith. When we say a hadith in this type of count, it means if there's a hadith, same hadith with 10 chains, that's considered 10 ahadith. And included on top of the hadith, they would also consider narrations of the Sahaba and Tabi'een to be included under that. How does Imam of Ahl Sunnah and Hadith, who memorizes 1 million hadith, and compiled in his book, Musnad Ahmad, just in that book alone, 40,000 hadith. He promotes weak hadith, and he uses them for fiqh. There's a fiqh and usul aspect to this within the madhab that they outlined. In Hashit ibn Muflih ala al-Muharrar, Ibn Muflih mentioned an usul rule within the Hanbali madhab. And that's accepted by the Hanabila and allegedly attributed to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal himself. It states in meaning that if a hadith refrains from something, says don't do something, and its chain is not authentic, it's weak, but not extremely weak, then that order deterring from something that would, in normal, usual circumstances, be considered haram in such context, it'll be diverted into being disliked instead of haram due to the hadith being weak. In general usul rules, an order deterring from something with nothing to divert it, no additional proof to divert it, it would be considered haram. They said here, due to the hadith being weak, we'll consider it disliked rather than haram. They also said, if the hadith is weak, but not extremely weak, and it orders you to do something, That would normally, under normal circumstances, be an obligation, if there's nothing to divert it from being a wajib. But they said, because the hadith is weak, we'll defer it to being a mustahab or a mandub, meaning a recommended act, due to the hadith being weak. So one needs to be careful how they take things and how they loosely accuse others of not having knowledge, or mutaqaddimin principles, or not being a muhaddith, or using weak ahadith. They need to watch what they're saying. Now, going back to the author's next statement, he said, وَهِيَ الْوُضُوء يَحْتَوِي عَلَى سُنَّةٍ وَهُوَ التَّسْمِيَةِ وَغَسْلُ الْيَدَيْنِ قَبْلَهُ ثَلَاثًا. The next sunnah of wudu is washing the hands 3 times. It's actually 2 sunnah right here. Washing the hands 3 times. Washing the hands is 1 sunnah, and doing it 3 times is another. Washing the hands before performing wudu, and it's washing the hands to ar-rusakh. Ibn Manzur in Lisan al-Arab said ar-rusakh is the joint connecting the hand with the forearm. This is right here, up to here. Some ulama consider washing the hands, which is not a dispute or anything, it's just a different way of explaining things. They consider washing the hands a sunnah for wudu, as part of wudu. That's the majority of the ulama. Some consider washing the hands 3 times an independent sunnah, not part of wudu. Like miswak, it's sunnah but not part of wudu. And that was some of the Shafi'iyyah. They said washing the hands prior to wudu is a sunnah, but it's not part of the wudu. The majority, overwhelming majority, say no, it is part of the wudu. And the proof for washing the hands in wudu is in the as being sunnah is in the verse. يَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ. In the verse pertaining to wudu, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not mention the hands. Had it been fard, it would have been mentioned in the verse. That's what they said. And there's also many ahadith describing the wudu of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam in detail. Hadith Uthman in the Sahihain, Hadith Abdullah ibn Zayd in the Sahihain, Hadith ibn Abbas in Sahih Bukhari. They mention the details of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam in one way or another making wudu. All those that mention that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam washed his hands before wudu. The Messenger's action combined with the verse not mentioning it, they said it's sunnah. And among the ahadith that mention the washing of the hands is what's in Sahih Bukhari on the authority of Abdullah ibn Zayd, that he was asked about the wudu of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَدَعَا بِتَوْرٍ مِّن مَاءٍ فَتَوَضَّأَ لَهُمْ فَكَفَأَ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ فَغَسَلَهُمَا ثَلَاثًا. Abdullah ibn Zayd was asked about the wudu of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he asked for a pot of water. He performed wudu, and he poured in the beginning of it water over his hands, and he washed his hands 3 times. Similar to that is a hadith by Uthman radiallahu anhu in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. And Uthman radiallahu anhu washed his hands 3 times, then said, رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم توضأ نحو وضوء هذا. After he washed his hands, he said, I saw that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam performing wudu like the wudu I just performed in front of you. There's also ijma'. Ibn al-Mundhir and An-Nawawi said, everyone we know of the people of knowledge have made ijma' that washing the hands in the start of wudu is a sunnah. Not mentioning it in the verse describing wudu shows it's not an obligation or wajib. But then mentioning that in the hadith shows that it's a sunnah. Now, if someone's hands are fully clean, he ate, he washed his hands, sat down, and got up to make wudu again. He just washed his hands and sat down, and then gets up again after a few minutes to make wudu. Then he should still wash his hands 3 times as a sunnah for the wudu. The next mas'ala, a different issue. Washing the hands after one wakes up. And why is this important? because there's a strong hadith on it, Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فلا يغمس يده في الإناء حتى يغسلها ثلاثة فإنه لا يدري أين باتت يده. When one of you wakes up, he must wash his hands 3 times, for he does not know where his hand has been. While he was sleeping, he doesn't know where his hand has been. So the ulama differ on this. So when you wake up, must you wash 3 times or no? The first opinion is that it's an obligation on one to wash his hands when he wakes up from a night sleep that voids wudu. A night sleep, all those are essential statements. Night sleep that voids wudu, one must wash his hands 3 times. It's one of 2 opinions by Imam Ahmad, and it's the opinion of Al-Madhab al-Zahiri. The second opinion is the overwhelming majority of the ulama. And among them is Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Malik, and the second opinion by Imam Ahmad. We know the principle of usul, which I mentioned earlier. An order to do something would be wajib. It's obligatory. You gotta do it. It's obligatory. Unless there's a factor that drops it down to being a sunnah. But why would the ulama here defer washing the hands when one gets up in the hadith to being a sunnah, even though there's a direct order? Why would some of the ulama do it? They said, if someone is sure his hand didn't touch impurity, he does not have to wash his hands. He only washes if he sees impurity or knows there's impurity on it. The proof on that, they said, is within the hadith. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ. This defers it from being a wajib. For he does not know where his hand was while he slept. They said that statement within the hadith shows the reason for washing. So it's not wajib, it's only sunnah unless one's hand has impurity on it. They also mentioned, to support that, the other hadith, إذا استيقظ أحدكم من منامه فليستنثر 3 مرات فإن الشيطان يبيت على خياشيمه. When one of you wakes up from sleep, performs wudu, he must clean his nose 3 times. Clean or blow his nose 3 times, because the devil spends the night in the interior of the nose. They said there's an ijma'. Some of the ulama related an ijma' that one does not need to blow his nose or clean his nose when he wakes up, except Ibn Hazm, who considered it a wajib. They said the same way the order to clean the nose is not wajib, the order to wash the hands is not wajib as well, because they're very similar and they're worded in a similar fashion. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ. A note on that hadith, فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَدْرِي أَيْنَ بَاتَتْ يَدُهُ. He doesn't know where his hand slept or what happened to his hand when he slept. Many ulama inferred from the word batat that it's only night sleep as opposed to day naps, because batat generally refers to night sleep. It most likely, wallahu a'lam, applies to both night and day sleep, but it's more common in night sleep because that's generally when one sleeps. But it appears that it applies to both night and day sleep. And just to show you how detailed fiqh is and how amazing and in-depth it is the ulama went to the extent of discussing if someone woke up from night sleep and wanted to make wudu. That's a combination of the last 2 masail that we took. He wants to make wudu and he woke up. Washing your hands from waking up is sunnah 3 times. And washing your hands for wudu is sunnah 3 times as well. He's in a position where he has both in front of him. Does the person wash his hands 6 times? Some ulama said this is an example of one ibadah that gets included under the other. And there should be only 3 washing of 3 times only. They said if 2 ibadat of similar nature like this can be combined, they should be combined because the concept or the goal of each of them is the same, which is to clean. We know the reason for washing hair is to cleanse oneself for ibadah. And it's the same for both of those matters, so 3 times is sufficient. Another group of ulama said no, follow the sunnah and wash 3 times for waking up and 3 times for wudu, which gives you a total of 6 times. They said each is an independent ibadah and each is intended on its own, so they're separate. And probably the more closer to being, both are good in strong opinions, either one is good, but probably the one where they said that one gets intertwined with the others a bit, probably stronger. The author then said, وَالْغَسْلَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ وَالثَّالِثَةُ وَالْغَسْلَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ وَالثَّالِثَةُ. We took the sunnah of tasmiyah before wudu, and washing the hands before wudu, and washing the hands before after waking up. Now he's saying repeating the washing of the limbs twice or 3 times. وَالْغَسْلَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ وَالثَّالِثَةُ. Notice this important order in detail. He mentioned washing the hands 3 times. Then after that he said, and then repeating washing of the limbs twice or thrice. Why? Because this statement, repeating the washing twice or thrice, applies to the rest of the wudu parts, doesn't apply to the previous statement pertaining to washing the hands. That's done with. That's 3 times. What he's mentioning now applies to the rest of the wudu parts. If you read it wrong in Arabic or misunderstand it, it could mislead one into thinking he means the hands are also included in that, which the hands are not included in that statement. The sunnah, according to the author, in washing the hands is 3 times. That's done. Then the statement pertains to the rest of the wudu parts, which means that it can be done once, twice, or 3 times. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam made wudu 1 time, as in Hadith ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma. And he did wudu twice. He repeated washing the limbs twice, as in Hadith Abdullah ibn Zayd radiallahu anhu. And then there's the Hadith of Uthman ibn Affan, where he washed the wudu parts 3 times. If the first wash encompasses the entire body parts that are supposed to be washed for wudu, if it encompasses everything, then that's sufficient. If not, the second one is not a sunnah, it's actually a wajib, because you have to get that part fully wet with water, as we already know. وَالْغَسْلَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ وَالثَّالِثَةُ. The key word here also is al-ghasla, washing. That's very essential in the author's book. Al-ghasla. What's mustahab and recommended in repeating washing the body parts of wudu is the ones that are washed. He said al-ghasla, the face, the hands, the feet. What's not washed, meaning what's wiped, it's mustahab to do it only once. The body parts that are wiped are like the head, the ears, the khuf and socks. That's the correct opinion, and that's contrary to al-madhhab al-shafi'i that says all the limbs of wudu, whether washed or wiped, you should go over them all 3 times, even the ones wiped. That's according to some of the Shafi'iyah. They use general ahadith of making wudu that mentioned 3 times, and they included wiping in the 3 times, like the head. They also used other hadith that include wiping over the head 3 times, which are very weak. Like the one that states, وَمَسَحَ بِرَأْسِهِ ثَلَاثًا, that the messenger wiped his head 3 times, but that's very weak. The correct opinion is that the head or body parts that are wiped are not included in going over them more than once. Now, here's an issue. Is it better to always wash the wudu body parts twice and 3 times? If you have time to do it 3 times, is it better? The statement of the author appears broad in that it implies that it's always sunnah to wash twice or thrice. Some said washing wudu parts 3 times is better than 2, and 2 is better than 1. Why? They said because it covers more, and there's a hadith pertaining to that. In Nawawi and Shawkani and Ibn Rushd and others stated that washing 3 times is more complete and 1 is sufficient. That's if the water touches the entire part that you're supposed to wash. And I believe that the more correct opinion is to mix it up in this matter. Sometimes do wudu washing the body parts 1 time, sometimes twice, and sometimes 3 times. And sometimes even within one wudu to do some body parts twice and some 3 times. That's the more accurate form of sunnah, wallahu a'lam. That's called tanawwu' al-ibadah, mixing between ibadat. Because the complete sunnah is to do all of that which the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. And he did 1, and he did twice, and he did thrice, as in the hadith. So it's best done precisely like him, mixing up between those forms. That's called tanawwu' al-ibadah. Like dua al-istiftah, the dua of the opening of the salah. There's many forms of ad'iyah for dua al-istiftah. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated many of them, and they were related to us. The best is to rotate, mix, and change up between them. It's like the various forms of tashahhud that were related to us. Some ask which one's the best one. The best is to rotate, mix, and change up between the various forms of ibadat, and likewise the same over here. The same over here and mixing up, sometimes doing it 3 times, sometimes once, and sometimes twice. What about going above 3 times in wudu? If the water encompasses what it should of the limbs, then it's makruh. It's disliked to wash the body parts more than 3 times. In Nawawi and Shawkani said, ulama said it's ijma' that it's disliked to wash over 3 times for wudu if the water touches that entire limb that you're supposed to wash. Ibn al-Mubarak said, whoever goes over 3 times in wudu is most likely going to get sin. Why? Why do they say that? Because it's violating the sunnah. Imam Ahmad and Ishaq said, who goes over 3 times in wudu is afflicted. لا يزيد على الثلاث إلا رجل مبتلى. There's a supposed hadith that the ulama mentioned something about its narration and it has some weakness in it. And it's that Arabi came to the messenger and asked the messenger about the wudu. And the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam told him to do it 3 times, or showed him 3 times. He said, هذا الوضوء فمن زاد على هذا فقد أساء وتعدى أو ظلم. So the Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him about wudu. He showed him how to perform it, washing each part 3 times. Then he said, this is wudu. The messenger said, this is wudu. Whoever does more than this has done evil and transgressed in the limits and wronged himself. Ulama spoke about its authenticity, but the ijma' and general rules of following the ibadat precisely are more than sufficient, and that hadith isn't really needed for that matter. And that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam never went over 3, and we follow the ibadat precisely in such matters. And also the verse, the general verse, وَمَنْ يَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. Whoever transgresses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's limit has wronged his own self. It somewhat falls under that verse. And that gives birth to the next mas'ala. If one does go over 3 times, is his wudu valid? Did that void his wudu? We mentioned that ulama strongly deterred and hinted that he may get sin for going over 3. It's disliked. But is his wudu accepted? Ad-Darimi rahimahullah said that some ulama said if he goes over 3 times, his wudu is invalid because it's like going over in salah, like someone making the dhuhr 5 rak'at. Ibn Hajar and Nawawi responded and said it's disliked but does not invalidate the wudu. And they said this is different than salah, so you can't compare the two. And that's the correct. It's disliked, one shouldn't do it, but it does not void the wudu. I think we'll stop here. Jazakumullahu khair. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.